Saquon Barkley breaks a 40-year-old rushing record against the Giants the final week of the season.
And look, talking about Graz, first guessing here, when you have a high-character, productive player in your building and he's roughly 6% of your cap, he never, ever, ever leaves. And boy, it would be ironic if that happened.
You know, the thing with the Giants, and there has been what we have watched as they have completely devolved / dissolved from where they were, is you see the significance of a locker room and understanding the pulse of it. And you've talked to me a little bit about that sometimes as a general manager, sometimes you might miss on something because even though things might make football sense or financial sense, they actually diminish or create a problem that you don't see coming. And that's what, by choosing Daniel Jones over Barkley in the first place, B, then when Barkley did everything you could ask him to do, good soldiered it to the end, they still let him walk away last year. And then C, the minute that Daniel Jones no longer suited their purposes, they couldn't have gotten rid of him fast enough and punted on the rest of their season. The way they have mishandled the emotional piece of this in their locker room has been, candidly, even for an outsider, stunning to watch.
Well, sometimes it's not just a position, right? You have to value the person and the player. And sometimes when that person, is a force multiplier, like Tannenbaum always talks about, he's a guy that does everything right. You're sending a signal to your locker room that it doesn't matter if you do all the right things, if you don't hold out for training camp, if you come in and you're not a distraction and you play at a high level, that it doesn't matter. Right, so I think they diminished the value of what Saquon Barkley meant to the team as not just a position that's a position that we devalue, but as a player and what he does in that locker room.
And Greedy, Graz mentioned this earlier as well, but an objective indice this time of year to see if teams are still competing, like the Saints, totally competing. You look at the Giants, look at the number of guys that are practicing, look at the number of guys going on IR. They have absolutely tapped out. There is no buy-in. And to Bart's point, I think part of that, Greeny, is a lot of those players are saying, if you don't pay that guy, what are you going to do about me when my contract's up?
Yeah. So a weird situation where if a guy breaks the all-time rushing record, it's the opposing team that's happy for him. like a lot of those players will be psyched for him.
Yeah, not the coach, the general manager, or the owner, though. That's for darn sure. So let's get back to the question that we were originally meaning to ask here. Do you believe that the Giants will and should, the Giants, excuse me, it's a Freudian slip, that the Eagles should and will prioritize getting Saquon Barkley the rushing record?
When you say prioritize, right? I think it matters. I think it's a big deal to him and to them, and that it should be, right? I mean, this is, again, you talk about the locker room. Like, how cool would it be for the offensive line? That's an offensive line accomplishment, too, right? Yeah. They want that. I'm 100% sure the Eagles' offensive line wants Saquon Barkley to break this record. So, yes, I think it's a fun thing to rally around, and it's something they should go for. What did you say earlier? 130 yards a game in his last 3 games?
139 is what he needs to average.
It's a lot. So if he gets 50 this week and that's it, then maybe you recalibrate and say, well, that's not really within range. But if he's got a shot going into Week 18 and he needs 75 yards to get there, yeah, man, let him do it.
I guess the point I'm making is that as you work towards the end of a season, and this is unquestionably a Super Bowl team, it might be the best team in the NFL, do you have concern of putting maybe giving him a little less workload, especially after...
And I'm telling you, if Saquon Barkley was sitting right here, Greeny, he would say, ring first, record second.
He did say that.
The question was, do you want to go for your own personal single game high? Right. Not the all-time record. You have a chance every week to beat your own personal single game high. This is once in a lifetime.
And he did say it. I mean, he was asked the question, and he did say this week, I'm not going to be upset if I don't get the record. I want to win the Super Bowl. And A, you would always expect him to say that, and B, no one would expect him to put the record ahead of the ring. But they don't have to be binary. It doesn't have to be one or the other.
I mean, if it's close in sight, then you do it. But the reality is Saquon is sitting at 285 carries right now. So you worry about him breaking down in the postseason. You talk about he's been averaging 30 touches or 30 carries a game. You add that up, he's getting close to that DeMarco Murray type of numbers where the next season can be diminished a little bit. So you want to make sure you preserve him for the length of the contract, not just for the first year.
And he doesn't have the cleanest history there either, health-wise. So, yeah, I think it's a tough tightrope to walk. But if they have a chance in Week 18, I think they're going to let him have
For the record, let's put the picks up on the screen. I think this is an interesting game. If you go back to the first time these two teams played each other, the final score was not fully indicative.
20 points in the fourth quarter.
Of how close this game was, right? And so, Mike Tannenbaum, you're another one who thinks Washington plays them tough this week.
They have Marshawn Lattimore this game. They didn't in the other one.
All right, so as you can see, we are split down the middle. But let's go back to Saquon as we go back to Joe Fortenbaugh here our betting expert who has been giving us picks all morning long. What is your best player prop on Eagles Commanders?
So let's lean into the narrative you guys were discussing. 19.5 rushing attempts will go over. Now, we can talk all about whether or not they should rest him for the playoffs, just like we can talk last week about A.J. Brown and whether or not they should get him the ball to feel better. Those are narratives. It all comes down to the matchup, and the matchup is favorable for Barkley here. Let's start with this. We're going to get back to the roots in this game. Pre-bye, when the Eagles were struggling, 18 carries per game for Barkley. The offensive line goes into a meeting with Sirianni. They say, let's run the ball more. Boom, you see the result, and it's resulting in wins. Now back to the narrative versus the matchup. Washington ranks 27th in the NFL in defensive rush success rate. Why would you want to throw against them? Just like last week in the Pittsburgh game, why would you want to run against them when you can throw against that man coverage? Run the ball in this matchup. Barkley goes over 19.5 carries.
So over 19.5 carries, and then it'll be interesting to see how many yards that adds up to because, again, over 139 puts him on pace to break the record in the final week of the season. Outstanding. Joe, coming up, everything you need to know. Asiano, I'm starting with you. What if the New York Jets decide to bring Aaron Rodgers back as their quarterback next year?
Then they're even dumber than we thought. Like like let someone else make the mistake you just made. He's going to be 41. What's the case for this? I don't understand it. You've lived it for 2 years. It's been a complete catastrophe. Cut the cord, move on, do something else.
The case for it would be twofold, Mike T. One, and I'm not suggesting that I'm endorsing it, but the case for it would be one, the last few weeks he's actually played better. Since he got healthy and they've gotten their offensive line a little better, he has actually played fairly well. And two, and maybe more to the point, if not him, then who? Who exactly is your option?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Grady. Those are great points. And just to add to it, there's so many teams that will be looking for a quarterback when you think about the Giants and the Raiders. And now you can add teams like Tennessee, disappointed with Levis, New Orleans, disappointed with Derek Carr. So when you think about Aaron Rodgers, not perfect, older, things like that, but from a supply and demand standpoint, there's going to be a ton of teams. The demand for quarterbacks is more than we realize.
Yeah, let that grenade go off in someone else's building this time.
We'll see what happens. Bart, I'll come to you on the next one. What if Michael Penix leads the Falcons to the playoffs this year?
Well, this is a team that's looking for a new quarterback. They just fortunate enough that they drafted him, and everybody was skeptical about the draft pick. But with Kirk Cousins kind of not, being able to play at a high level right now, Penix coming in, one of the best throwers of the ball. If he's able to get them to the playoffs, and it's the smartest pick ever, right? Because what you need is insurance. Because when they lost Matt Ryan, they didn't have a backup plan. This was insurance, and now they're cashing in their insurance policy.
Pretty expensive insurance, Graziano.
Yeah, but he can be a quarterback for the next 15 years.
But they would have spent if Kirk Cousins never plays for them again. They will have paid him
very likely
yeah. $90 million to play 14 games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, again, like it's not. We talked. This is not second guessing. We talked about this when they made the pick. You cannot get maximum value out of the Cousins contract and the Penix rookie contract. Impossible. So yeah, Penix leads them to the playoffs. He's their quarterback in the future. Cool pick. Big mistake. Kirk Cousins goes down as an all-time bad signing.
Yeah, there's no way both of them can work, and that's why neither of them made sense when you put them together. Mike T, let's finish with you. What